Geography. How it affects the movement of people, products, and ideas. For my micro lesson, I used a content standard under the 7th grade social studies, more specifically geography. The content that is supposed to be emphasized for this standard are that geographic factors, climate, bodies of water, mountains, deserts, and proximity to natural resources can contribute to or impede the movement of people, products, and ideas. This includes the ability to engage in trade and war, to explore and colonize new lands, to find new places for settlement, and to spread religion and framework for governing. By the end of this lesson, students should be able to describe how geographic factors can promote or impede the movement of people, products, and ideas. Before modern forms of transportation, how did people get from place to place, and how far could they travel? From the earliest of people and into the early civilizations, people traveled mostly on foot or by domesticated animals. These people could only travel very short distances. They were dependent on the resources that they had with them or what they could carry, or resources that they could find along the way. These people didn't have the means of traveling across larger bodies of water and would have spent a lot of time and energy trying to navigate mountains or canyons where it would have taken them much longer to reach a new area. They would have had more limited interaction with other people, besides their immediate neighbors, until later on when new developments in technology and transportation would have made it easier to travel farther distances and settle in new places. Something to think about. If two groups of people have different resources, but they can't come into contact with one another, does trade occur? If one group makes a discovery or finds a better way of doing something, but it never reaches the other group, how fast can ideas spread? Water was often the biggest factor in how people traveled and how they moved products, as well as it is today. For example, people in Asia, Europe, and Africa can interact with each other, but not people in the Americas, and vice versa, because they could not cross the oceans that separated them. As advancements occurred, people could now travel farther to new lands. They wanted to branch out to find more resources, to gain more land, and to spread their ideas or religion and government. This process is best known as colonization. As people moved, they would claim the new territory they found for the country they came from and set up settlements there, regardless of who may or may not have already been living there. But where did these people settle? Often when people made new settlements throughout history, they continued to stay by the water as a means of food, travel, and protection. This new means of distance travel also allowed for people to come into greater contact with one another. But what happened when these interactions occurred? As people spread, whether it was across a region or across continents, they came into contact with different geographical and environmental factors as well as new people. For example, when colonists first came to what is now the United States, they were unfamiliar with the land. They eventually learned to use its resources and used much of what they found, such as the rich farmland, to grow crops to trade with other parts of the world. Colonists also came into contact with new people who we now know to be the Native Americans. This new interaction led to new conflicts, which often happened when areas were colonized. What happens when people want the same land for its geological and environmental benefits? As the settlements grew, many Native Americans were pushed from their land farther westward. Another phenomenon happened with many of the native peoples of both the North and South Americas. Because these people were geographically separated, they also developed immunities or defenses to different illnesses and diseases. As the native people were colonized, they interacted with many of the settlers that carried many new diseases, causing death in large numbers of the native people. However, there were also many more beneficial effects. As people came into contact with one another, ideas spread as well. Ideas were being spread between people, and they were doing so at a faster rate. Because of this, ideas could be quickly built upon and advancements in areas such as transportation, agriculture, and industry occurred. This constant quick contact also allowed an increase in trade or product movement. Due to geographical factors, people settled in different areas, which led them to have different resources and materials that they could trade. This occurred throughout history with this expansion and continues today. What are some products that are traded between different parts of the country or different parts of the world due to separation of resources? All over the world, there are different geological factors that play major roles in events like the ones discussed earlier. Each has its own set of advantages and disadvantages to the people around them. Below are listed a few. The first is water, both freshwater and saltwater. Some advantages are that fresh water is necessary for survival, both to drink and for food. Cities located on ports, either in freshwater, such as lakes, or ocean ports, handle trade easier due to location, and from there, goods are easily transported to inland areas or other ports. Water can also be used as protection against neighbors. Some disadvantages. Natural disasters due to climate, such as flooding or hurricanes, occur and can cause damage to settlements near water. The next is mountains. Some advantages of mountains are that they are good protection against neighbors due to hard-to-navigate terrain, and they contain many natural resources such as water, trees, and animals for shelter and food. Some disadvantages are that they are hard to cross and they can isolate people from one another when they need valuable resources outside of what they can make or grow themselves. This makes it harder to move products as well. The third is deserts. An advantage of deserts is that they can be used as protection against neighbors who are unfamiliar with desert terrain or water. However, they are harder to grow or find a lot of food, and water becomes very scarce. Climate. Climate is one of the biggest factors in the movement of people, products, and ideas. Climate is going to determine weather patterns, warm or cold, change in seasons, and occurrence of natural disasters, to name a few. It will also vary by region. This often made it harder to transition for earlier people who were trying to move from place to place because they would have to adapt to a new climate. For example, a change in season or temperature will affect what plants and animals will be available, how easily people can travel, and how fast and easily products can move from place to place. Climate is also going to determine what resources are available for different regions to use or to trade. Some examples of this are food supply, water supply, and richness of soil. For this lesson, I also created a possible project for students to create to show what they have learned. This slide and the one following it shows a very simple version of this project using my hometown as an example. Students would be asked to identify some of the geological factors in the area that they live. They could then research some of the history of the area to see how these factors made an impact, as well as how they are still impacting them today. They could also use photographs, maps, and illustrations to go along with their information.